Welcome to the Amazing Dinosaurs channel. This is a collection of Ornithischian dinosaurs from Jurassic World. Now, Ornithischian dinosaurs are dinosaurs that have a pelvis shape similar to that of a bird. And we're gonna first start out with this ginormous Triceratops figure. This is the largest one in my entire collection, and it's got a super dark brown coloring with some spots on the top and the lighter underbelly. For the next Ornithischian, we're gonna go with a Stegosaurus. This one comes in a really cool camouflage coloring with the brown, the green, and then the clay red coloring on top. And it's got a secret action button right here on one of its plates to swing its tail back and forth. Here is the Velociraptor dinosaur. It looks kind of like a Triceratops overall, but its frill is a lot larger, and these horns on its head are way larger as well. It's got this dark red coloring all over its body and this action button on its back to move its head with sound effects. Next, we're gonna go with the Cretaceous dinosaur. This one's quite a bit different looking. And this one is from the Hammond collection, so the paint job is pretty good, but most importantly, it has many more points of articulation all over its body. Over here on the right, I've got another Hammond collection figure. This is the Ankylosaurus figure. It's a decent amount larger than many of the standard Ankylosaurus figures, and of course, it has many more additional points of articulation all over its body compared to the standard figures. Back here, I've got another Stegosaurus looking dinosaur. This one is called the Kentrosaurus. It's got the plates along the top, but then it turns to these spikes all along the back. And then it also has these massive spikes coming right out of both sides. And there's actually this action button right here at the top to swing its torso back and forth to attack with those spikes. Right here is the Iguanodon, which is one of my favorite herbivore dinosaurs. This figure is a lot more light colored than many of these other ones, with this super light tan and then the brown along the top, and there is a chomping action when you press down on its body. Next up for the Ornithischian dinosaurs is this normal Triceratops figure. It's quite a bit smaller than the one that I showed you at the beginning, and it's got this green coloring with some basic brown detailing along the top and a chomping and stabbing action whenever you press down on its body. It comes with sound effects too. And here's another Triceratops figure, but this one is pretty special and is one of my most recent Triceratops. This is the Epic Evolution Triceratops. You can see from its skin that it has kind of like armor plating, which is definitely not normal for Triceratops. It also has this little slide button on the back of its frill that you can press up and down to reveal additional spikes coming out the top of its frill. And then finally, there's this little wheel on its back that you can spin to get a new type of stabbing action for the Epic Evolution series. Next up, why don't we go with a smaller figure? This one is the Edmontosaurus dinosaur. It's got the dark blue coloring with the orange-brown coloring along the top, and there is no attack feature, but you can move the neck, the arms, the legs, and the tail. Here's another smaller dinosaur. This one is called the Velociraptor, and I believe it is part of the Epic Evolution collection. It's shaped kind of like a Triceratops, but it has these two smaller horns on the top of its head. Let's go back to another big dinosaur. This one is called the Ornithischian. It's got the dark green coloring with some brighter detailing along its spine and some more bright coloring along its nose and on its neck too. And you can move the legs and the tail, and there's this special button on its side to activate the sound effects and head movement. Here's a crazy looking Ornithischian. This one is called the Styracosaurus. Like many of the others, it kind of looks like a Triceratops, but check out all these additional spikes coming out of its frill. That is a ton of them. And this little figure actually has an attack feature too. When you press down on its tail, it lifts up its head for a roar/stabbing action. Let's check out this other Stegosaurus figure in here. This one though has some pretty different coloring with the dark brown along the sides, the lighter underbelly, and then the tan and green along its plates. And this figure actually has two attack features. First, when you press down on this plate, you get that same tail swinging action, but when you press down on this other plate here, you actually get to move the head up and down. Next, let's go with this crazy bright colored dinosaur. This one is the Zuniceratops. So as you can tell, it's related to a Triceratops. It's got the bright yellow-green coloring on the sides and the darker blue on the top and along its face and frill, and it's got these two big horns coming out of its head. Now let's grab this one over here. This one is called the Pentaceratops, another relative of the Triceratops. It's quite a large figure, and this frill is probably one of the largest that I have in my collection. It's actually this soft rubber, but it has tons of tiny horns along the top and then of course those 3 huge horns right on its face. And this figure has 2 action buttons. The first button lifts its head up and down for this massive stabbing action, and the second button swings its torso back and forth. This dinosaur right here has one crazy name. It might look kind of like a Stegosaurus, but it's actually called a gigant Spinosaurus. It has some plates on its back similar to a Stegosaurus, but then you can see these massive spikes coming right out of its shoulders on both sides. And on this figure, the head and tail are actually connected on the inside, so if you move the head back and forth, it swings the tail back and forth too. And I've got another Ankylosaurus figure right here. This one's a bit smaller than the Hammond collection one that I showed you, but it has this really cool clay red coloring along the bottom. It has the brown top where all of its armor is, and then all of the spikes and then the little spikes right on top are a lighter tan color. And this figure has an attack feature. When you press down on its back, it swings its tail back and forth with sound effects. Now this is another really cool dinosaur right here. This is the Pachycephalosaurus. And this figure I believe is from the Legacy collection, so it's pretty special. It has this really cool gray coloring with this really awesome blue coloring. This is a really nice blue color, I think. And a little bit of brown for the underbelly, and best of all, it actually has an attack feature. When you press down on the tail, the head is spring-loaded, so it'll actually spring it forward as if it's headbutting, which of course is what this dinosaur is known for because of its super hard head. Next up for the Ornithischians, let's go with this little one. This is called a mini dinosaur. It's got some pretty bright coloring too. It's like this yellow-green coloring, and its spikes all over the top of its body are a little more brightly colored. And there is no attack feature for this dinosaur, but you can move the legs back and forth, you can move the head a little bit, and you can twist the tail just a little bit as well. And here is yet another Stegosaurus looking dinosaur. This one though is called the Tuojongosaurus. It also has the plates running along its back and the spikes along its tail. And I think this one is part of the Epic Evolution collection. And it's got this really cool attack feature that when you press down on the front of its body, it has this massive swinging action with its tail. This little dinosaur here is called the Protoceratops. It's a quadrupedal dinosaur, meaning it stands on all 4 legs, and it's got this kind of purplish coloring, but a little bit of yellow detailing along the top. And there is no action feature on this figure, but you can move the tail back and forth, the legs back and forth, and you can pose the head in all different directions. And last of all, I've got the massive Parasaurolophus figure. This dinosaur is super brightly colored. Check out all that yellow. It has the white underbelly, and then the brown striping and a little bit of red right along its face. This figure is pretty posable. You can move the arms and the legs, and there's actually 2 different action buttons. The first moves its head up and down for this roaring action, and the second swings its tail back and forth for its attack feature. And here's the entire Ornithischian dinosaur collection from biggest to smallest. Which of these dinosaurs is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Let's check out the first theropod. This is the 93 real field T-Rex figure that came out really recently. It's got the rubbery skin and the stomach compartment, so you can actually feed this T-Rex smaller dinosaurs. Our first sauropod, I believe, is a Brachiosaurus figure. This figure comes in the dark green. It has some red detailing along the top and the lighter underbelly, and of course the super long neck with the smaller head in the front. Our next theropod is the Camp Cretaceous Epic Roaring T-Rex. It comes in the light brown coloring with the darker brown along the top and the tail that controls the head and the chomping. Our next sauropod, I believe, is another Brachiosaurus. This one has much more interesting detailing along its body. You can see all the different muscles and the bones as well. And it comes in this darker green coloring. There's also some darker detailing throughout. And at the top of its head, it's got some dark orange eyes. Our next theropod is this special Spinosaurus figure. This figure is from Jurassic World, but it actually has custom coloring over its entire body, so you won't see this coloring anywhere else. Plus, it's got the button on its head for the chomping action too. For the next sauropod is the Nigersaurus figure from Jurassic World. This one is part of the new Dino Tracker series. It has 2 tones of green, the bright green in the front and the darker green in the back, and a slide lever action on its back for the sound effects and movement. This next theropod is another T-Rex. This one's pretty special because it comes in a dark green coloring with the black accenting on top. which is pretty unusual for the Jurassic World figures. And its entire body is posable, and of course you can chomp the jaw with the button at the top of its head. Next up is a strange looking sauropod. I'm actually not sure what type of sauropod this is, so let me know in the comments if you recognize the species. But it has some amazing coloring with the green, purple, blue, red, and these interesting spikes along its neck. Now let's check out this one that I just bought, and let's see what it is. All right, this is a theropod, and it is the battle damage Spinosaurus. This one was actually really hard to find, so let's open it up and check it out. I am super excited to finally have this to add to my collection. This is the first blue and yellow Spinosaurus figure that I have. In terms of its shape and its size, it's pretty similar to the Legacy collection and the Camp Cretaceous version. But for the best part, let's check out the battle damage right here on the side. That is so cool. That is ginormous. And then you can also even open up its ribs to reveal what's underneath right here. And there's a hidden button right here on its spine that make its insides spin. Now that is pretty awesome. Let's do another theropod. This is a custom colored T-Rex figure. This one's pretty special because it looks like a fire T-Rex. And I think it definitely looks scarier than most of the other T-Rex figures. This next sauropod figure is an Ankylosaurus, and this one was for Jurassic World Dominion. It's got a bunch of interesting little spikes all over its body, and you can use the tail to move the head around and open and close its mouth. This theropod is called the Suchomimus figure. This version is in the dark blue with the yellow accenting and one action button on its back to chomp the jaw. This other theropod figure is the Therizinosaurus figure from Jurassic World Dominion. It's a pretty big figure, and it has feathered texturing all over its body, and the best part are these huge claws on its hands. This next figure here might be a Diplodocus figure, I'm actually not sure, but it has some cool coloring, the brown stripes on the back, the gray on the sides, the tan underbelly, and it has some pretty decent detailing too. They even colored in the eyes. This theropod figure is the Jurassic World Carcharodontosaurus. This version of this dinosaur has the tan body with the brown and orange accenting along the top, and all these little spikes running along its back, and a single action button for chomping. Now here's a pretty special one. This is the Lego edition Brachiosaurus figure. I think these figures are pretty rare and hard to find nowadays, so I'm pretty happy to have one in my collection. This theropod is the Seats Microrarum figure from Jurassic World. It's colored in the orange, the tan, and the dark blue. It's got a ton of rows of spikes running along its head and its back. And it has the action that when you move its tail, it also moves its head and controls its jaw. This sauropod is called the Amargosaurus. It has the dark brown coloring with the darker accenting and a little bit of red along its spines. And check out, there's actually 2 rows of spines along its neck that form into one spine running down its body. And this figure has 2 action buttons. The first button moves its head up and down, and the second action swings its tail back and forth. This theropod is the Allosaurus figure. This version is in the dark green and it has the white and red accenting. It's got a short row of spines right on the top of its neck. And this figure has the slide lever action for a bunch of sound effects and roar poses. This next sauropod kind of looks like a Brachiosaurus figure to me, and I think this is the only one that I have that is red colored. And sadly, you can't move any of its limbs or its tail or anything like that, but I do appreciate the detail and texturing along its body. This theropod is another Allosaurus figure, but this one is in the gray with the yellow accenting. It also has posable arms and legs and a single action button on its back for chomping. Here's the second Suchomimus figure of this sauropod versus theropod collection. This second version has the bright yellow body with the brown accenting along the top, and this Suchomimus features 2 action buttons, one for chomping and the other for swinging its tail. Man, do I have a lot of Brachiosaurus figures. This one is also a Brachiosaurus, It's got some interesting orange spotting all over its body, and it's quite a bit smaller than many of the other figures so far. This next theropod is another T-Rex figure. This one is from the first Jurassic World movie, and it's actually a pretty special one. It's got some interesting coloring, patterning along its side, and it actually has hidden spikes that pop out when you press a button. Over here, I've got an Irritator figure from Jurassic World. This is an older version that features the brown sides with the two tones of blue along its spine. And this feature comes with sound effects and a tail that controls the head. I've also got some Baryonyx figures in here, like this dark green one with the brown coloring along the top and the single action button on its back for chomping. This next figure is a basic Velociraptor figure from Jurassic World. This one is actually Velociraptor Blue. And since it's a basic figure, you can only move the arms and the legs and the tail, but there's no action button. Up next is my first baby Brachiosaurus figure. This one is in the gray with purple coloring along the top. And even though it's so small, you can still open and close the mouth. This giant figure in here is my Camp Cretaceous Spinosaurus figure. Compared to the battle damaged version that we saw earlier, this one has the tan body with the brown along the top, and then the red spine and the red face. This next theropod is a Monolophosaurus figure, and is a pretty small figure, but it has the dark blue coloring with the I think that's kind of a brown accenting along the top of its body. And with this figure too, you can open and close its mouth as well as move its arms and its legs and twist the tail too. Here's my next baby Brachiosaurus figure. This one is a bit more recent and it comes in the brown coloring with a little bit of tan accenting along the side. The next theropod is actually a Pyroraptor, which is very similar to a raptor, but you can see that it has feather texturing all over its body here, and it has these really cool accent feathers right behind its head too. And here is my third juvenile Brachiosaurus figure. This one is the light green version with the dark green along the top, and of course the fully posable arms, tail, neck, and mouth. And here's the final theropod. This is an Atrociraptor figure. This version is the bright orange with the tan accenting along its body. Finally, we have these two huge sauropod figures. This first one on the right is a giant Brachiosaurus figure. It's much larger than this one over here. And this Brachiosaurus is actually an older version. There is a Jurassic World Dominion figure that's come out more recently. And this figure here is the Apatosaurus figure from Jurassic World Dominion. It's smaller compared to the Brachiosaurus, but still a giant compared to many of the other figures. Let's get started with the largest quadrupedal that I have, which is this huge Dreadnoughtus figure. This dinosaur has the blue with the tan striping, and it has one of the longest necks out of any of my figures. So let's set this figure on the very left because this is my largest dinosaur. Next up in size is one of these Brachiosaurus figures. Let's first choose this one right here. It's got the classic brown coloring, and you can move its legs, its neck, and you can even open and close its mouth. Let's move this Brachiosaurus right next to the Dreadnoughtus. Check out that size difference between these two. Next up, we've got another Brachiosaurus figure, but this one is newer. This one is part of the Jurassic World Dominion collection. Now its body shape is pretty much the same as this one right here, but you'll notice that it has some different coloring, and the best part of all is that it has this reflective blue coloring along its face. Next up in size, we've got this huge Apatosaurus figure. This dinosaur is quite a bit smaller than the Brachiosaurus figures, but it's still quite large. It has the green with the light green striping, and I'm sure you recognize this dinosaur from the Jurassic World Dominion movie. Let's keep going. I think the next biggest in size is this Amargosaurus figure. I think this figure's pretty old and that they don't make it anymore, but it's really cool because it has these two huge spines running down its neck and two action buttons, one to move the neck up and down and one to swing the tail back and forth. All right, let's set this down right next to the Apatosaurus. Wow, look at that size difference. Next up in size, let's go with the Jurassic World Dominion Ankylosaurus figure. This figure features the clay red and brown coloring. It's got tons of spikes all over its body, and it has the tail that controls the head and the chomping action too. Let's set the Ankylosaurus down next in line. Oh, those are pretty close in size. Next up, let's go with the Pentaceratops figure. This dinosaur has one of the largest frills that I've seen out of any dinosaur. Plus, it's got horns all along its frill and on its face too. And it has two action buttons, one to move the head up and down, and one to move the torso side to side. All right, let's set this down next to the Ankylosaurus. Next up in size, I think we gotta go with the Stegosaurus figures here. This first one has brown, it's got green, it's got the clay red coloring, and like all the other Stegosaurus figures, it has a tail swinging attack button. Let's set down this first Stegosaurus next to the Pentaceratops. And I think all these Stegosauruses are going to be pretty similar in size, so let's just go with this one next. It's got the blue-gray coloring with the darker coloring along the top, and the pink underbelly, and of course the swinging tail attack. Let's get this Stegosaurus down next in line. This next one is brighter in color. It's almost a teal-green color. It's still got a lighter underbelly, and it has some cool highlights right along its spine. This one will be our third Stegosaurus in line. And our fourth and final Stegosaurus of this collection is this gigantic Trackers Stegosaurus. And this is actually a very new figure. It's got some really cool coloring all over its body. Plus it comes with this crazy looking Dino Tracker backpack. Let's set it down as our fourth Stegosaurus. Next in size, I think, is this Diabloceratops figure. Check out these super huge horns on the top of its head and on the front of its face too. It's got a fiery red color over most of its body and a light tan underbelly. Plus there's an action button to swing its head back and forth. Let's put this down next in size. Up next, let's go with this Sinoceratops in the light gray blue with the tan detailing. And check out those super dark black eyes. That's pretty crazy looking. Let's put this one down next in line, and you can use the tail to move the head too. I've got another Sinoceratops figure right here that is probably the exact same in size, but it's got different coloring. This one is the green with the tan detailing, and this one has some bright yellow eyes. So let's set this one down too, and look at that. This one also controls the head by moving the tail. It looks like we've got a few Triceratops figures up next. This first one has the dark brown with the two tones of blue along its back, and just like these Sinoceratops figures, you can use the tail to control the head. Let's go ahead and grab this next Triceratops figure with the gray and darker gray detailing along the top. But with this figure, instead of the tail that controls the head, there are two action buttons on its back. One controls the head for roaring, and the other controls its tail for swinging back and forth. Now let's set this down next in line as the second Triceratops. And this next Triceratops has some green coloring with brown along its frill and along its back too. And this Triceratops has an even different action. When you press down on its body, it does a roar, and it has sound effects too. Oh, you know what? I think there's another Triceratops here that I didn't even notice. This one has the clay red coloring with the brown detailing along the top and on the frill. And this one has one single action button on its back for the roaring action. This next quadrupedal dinosaur is a Kentrosaurus. It's got the spines running all along its back and these ginormous spikes coming right out of its sides. And this one has a pretty cool action that when you slide this back, it swings its torso back and forth to stab with those huge spikes. Now this dinosaur might be a little taller with its spines compared to the Triceratops, but we're gonna place it right here anyways. For the next up in size, we're gonna go with this dinosaur. This is the Edmontosaurus. Its front legs are smaller compared to its back legs. It's got some pretty cool coloring on its face and on that crown on the top of its head. And like many of these other cool figures that we've seen, you can use the tail to control the head. And it has sound effects too. Next, we're gonna go with this Iguanodon figure from Jurassic World Dominion. It's mostly tan, it's got some brown striping with the lighter streaks on the top. And with this figure, when you press down on its back, it has a chomping action. All right, next, let's go with this crazy looking dinosaur. This is a Sarcosuchus. It's got a long and narrow snout with tons of teeth. And the coolest part is that you can use the tail to control the head. The next dinosaur that we're gonna choose is this Ankylosaurus figure right here. This one is clay red, it's got some brown, and its spikes are a lighter color. And I think this one was from Jurassic World Dominion because when you press down on its back, it swings its tail back and forth. Let's go ahead and grab this next Ankylosaurus for our next in size. This one is a really old figure from Jurassic World. I think this one is from the first movie. And check out the size difference between the two. Next up, we've got two baby Brachiosaurus figures right here. And they each have their own unique color. This first one's gray, it's got some dark brown purple coloring along the top. And this other one is a much brighter color. It's a bright green with dark green right along the top. So let's set these down right next to the Ankylosauruses. Next in size, let's see, I think it might be this dinosaur, which I believe is called a Styracosaurus. It's got some super bright coloring along the front of its frill, which is really interesting, and it has some darker detailing along its back. Now let's set this down right next to the baby Brachiosauruses. I think next we're gonna go with this Miragaia figure from Jurassic World Dominion. Like the Kentrosaurus, this one also has some huge spikes sticking right out of its sides. Now let's set it down right next to the Styracosaurus. Next, why don't we go with this dinosaur? This is the Chialingosaurus. It looks somewhat similar to a Stegosaurus because it's got those spines in the top, but the spikes in the very back are quite a bit different, and it has these tiny little spikes coming out of its front legs. And let's set this one down next in line. Next, let's go with this crazy looking dinosaur. This is the Shringosaurus, and it's got a huge and very long neck. It's got those two evil looking horns on the top of its head too. Very wild looking. Let's put this next in line. For the next in size, why don't we go with this one? This is a Calavosaurus. It's got a dark blue body with some orange detailing. It's got some light blue stripes along its tail and on its mouth as well. And it looks like we're running out of space at the edge of the table, so we're gonna start a new line right in front. For our next in size, let's go with this baby Triceratops figure with extreme battle damage right on the side. And let's put this one down right next to the Calavosaurus. This next dinosaur, I believe, is called a Zuniceratops. It's got a pretty bright body, and it's got two horns on the front of its head. So let's set this down right next to the baby Triceratops. They look pretty similar. For our next one, why don't we go with this baby Stegosaurus figure? And you may notice that this baby Stegosaurus came as part of a set with this huge Stegosaurus right here. You can see that they're very similar in color. So let's set this down next in size, next to the Zuniceratops. And next we'll go with these two Dimetrodon figures. This first one is the older figure of the two, and this figure has an action that when you move its tail, it chomps its jaw open and closed. So we're gonna put that right there. And this other Dimetrodon figure is from Jurassic World Dominion, so it's pretty new. And it's got a much brighter spine, although it does not have any action buttons. So we're gonna set it down right next to the other one. Next up, it looks like we've got a Sauropelta figure. This is a pretty small figure, but it has some huge spikes on its back in comparison. It's really cool. So let's set this one down next in line. Here we have a small dinosaur. This is a Mosasaurus. It's got blue with some black detailing along the top and the yellow underbelly. And we'll set this down right here. And finally, we have two Minmi figures. This first one right over here is mostly green in color. Its spikes are more of a yellow color, but it has a ton of spikes along its back for protection. And this second Minmi figure right here is red in color, and its spikes are a bright white in contrast. But other than that, it is pretty identical to the other Minmi figure. So let's first start with a Saurischian dinosaur, and this is the Indominus Rex. These dinosaurs are ginormous. They stand at around 18 feet high and 50 feet long from their head to their tail, and they can weigh up to 6 tons as well. And out of all the carnivore figures that I have, this Indominus Rex figure is definitely one of the largest. Now let's go over to the Ornithischian side. This is a Stegosaurus dinosaur. These dinosaurs in real life could be between 20 and 30 feet long from tail to head, up to 13 feet tall from the ground all the way to the top up here, and they could weigh 11,000 pounds too, so that is one heavy dinosaur. And this figure's got a secret hidden attack button. When you press down on its plate right here, it swings its tail back and forth. Next up for the Saurischian dinosaurs is the Theropod dinosaur, made popular by Jurassic World Dominion. This dinosaur lived in the late Cretaceous period. They could be up to 33 feet from head to tail and around 16 feet tall, and that is way taller than human beings. Plus, they could weigh around 5 tons as well. And this Therizinosaurus figure is pretty cool because you can use the tail to move the torso around and chomp the jaw. Now for the Ornithischian side is an Ankylosaurus dinosaur. This species lived in the late Cretaceous period as well. They could grow up to 26 feet long from head to tail and could weigh almost 9 tons in total. This Ankylosaurus figure is from the Hammond collection, so it's a lot larger than many of my other ones, and it has many more points of articulation, so you can pose it in all sorts of different ways and even open its mouth. Now for the Saurischian side is a super popular dinosaur, of course. This is a Tyrannosaurus Rex. These dinosaurs could grow to be 40 feet long from head to tail and 12 feet tall, and they weighed around 6 tons as well. This is the Hammond collection Tyrannosaurus Rex, so it's a lot more detailed than many of my other figures, and it is very posable, just like the Ankylosaurus was. Back to the Ornithischian side, I've got a Sinoceratops figure. This dinosaur species could grow to 16 feet from head to tail, and they could weigh up to 2 tons. It has many similar features to a Triceratops, like the frill and then the spikes on the front. And with this figure, you can move the tail back and forth to get some sound effects and to move its head. For the Saurischian dinosaurs, I've got an Allosaurus figure. This dinosaur species lived during the Jurassic period. They could grow to be 28 feet long from tail to head, which is pretty long but not quite as long as a T-Rex, and they could weigh up to 2 tons as well. This is my battle damage Allosaurus. You can see right here the battle damage is already opened up. You can even lift up the ribs and touch the intestines, or like the stomach on the inside. And then there's a button on its back for some sound effects and chomping. Next up, I've got a brand new figure that is actually a mixture of a Saurischian and an Ornithischian dinosaur. It is a Giganotosaurus and a Nasutoceratops, and it's from the Fierce Changers. So right now the figure is in its Giganotosaurus form, and you can move the tail around, the legs, the arms, and the head. So now let's see it transform into its Nasutoceratops form. And here it is in its Ornithischian form. You can see the Giganotosaurus features are now underneath, tucked away, and its dark brown features of the Nasutoceratops are now being shown. And right over here is a normal Nasutoceratops figure from Jurassic World. These dinosaurs were estimated to have been around 15 feet in length from tail to head and weighing around 1.5 tons. And this dinosaur has 2 action buttons on its back, one for lifting the head up for a stabbing or roaring action, and the other button on its back to swing its tail back and forth. Next up for the Saurischian side, I've got a Carnotaurus dinosaur figure. These dinosaurs in real life were probably around 30 feet in length from tail to head, around 10 feet tall, and they could weigh up to 2 tons as well. And this is a pretty sizable figure, slightly smaller than my T-Rex figures, and it has a tail that you can move back and forth to move its head and to chomp its jaw. My next Ornithischian dinosaur is the Hesperosaurus. These dinosaurs could reach 21 feet in length from tail to head, and they often weighed around 3.5 tons. It looks pretty similar to a Stegosaurus, and this figure is from the Epic Evolution collection, so it's got this little wheel dial thingy on its back to swing its tail back and forth. Now for the Saurischian side, I've got a Velociraptor blue figure. Velociraptors could grow to around 7 feet in total, and they weighed around 40 or 50 pounds, so pretty lightweight compared to a lot of other dinosaurs in here. And this figure's pretty cool because it moves in a pretty lifelike way. You can press down on its body, have it open and close its mouth. It is really cool. This next Ornithischian dinosaur is called a Parasaurolophus. These dinosaurs grew to around 33 feet in length, 15 feet tall when it's standing up, and around 3 or 4 tons. I think this figure is one of the earlier versions, but it still has this action button on its back, one for moving the tail back and forth, and the other button to move its head up and down, but there's no sound effects. The next Saurischian dinosaur is a Spinosaurus. This was the largest known carnivorous dinosaur, and it lived in the late Cretaceous period. These ginormous dinosaurs could grow to almost 60 feet in length, around 25 feet in height, and they could weigh between 13 and 22 tons. This Spinosaurus figure is one of my basic versions of the Spinosaurus, colored like the Legacy Collection larger Spinosaurus figure, but since it's the basic version, you can only move its arms, its legs, and its tail just a little bit. Next up, for the Ornithischian dinosaurs, I've got an Edmontosaurus dinosaur. This dinosaur species lived during the late Cretaceous period. It could be up to 50 feet in length from tail to head and weigh up to 9 tons. I really like the coloring on this figure with the tan and the dark blue along its back and its tail, and then the brighter coloring in the front. Now here is a Dilophosaurus for the Saurischian dinosaur side. This dinosaur species grew to around 20 feet in length and weighed around 700 pounds. This is the basic edition of the Dilophosaurus, so it's a lot larger of a figure than most, but it doesn't have as many features. You can move the arms, the legs, and the tail, and you can move the frills back and forth. Next up is the Cosmoceratops for the Ornithischian side. These dinosaurs grew to around 15 feet in length, and they weighed between 1 and 2 tons. And although this figure is small, it still has a special feature that when you move its tail, it moves its head up and down too. Here is a Concavinator dinosaur for the Saurischian side. This dinosaur lived during the early Cretaceous period, and it could grow up to 20 feet long and weigh up to 900 pounds. This Concavinator figure is from the Hammond collection, so it has much better coloring and detailing compared to other versions. Plus it has many additional points of articulation for really great posing too. This is the Avaceratops figure from the Epic Evolution collection. This Ornithischian dinosaur could grow to around 13 feet in length and weigh up to 1 ton. And you can move the legs on this figure and the head up and down, but sadly there are no special features. This next dinosaur is a Herrerasaurus dinosaur for the Saurischian dinosaur side. This dinosaur lived during the late Triassic period, and adult dinosaurs could grow to around 20 feet in length and weigh up to 700 pounds. And I think this might actually be my newest Herrerasaurus figure, and it has an action button right here on its back for a jumping motion. Just a small handful of dinosaurs left in here. This Ornithischian dinosaur is the Minmi species. This dinosaur was probably around 10 feet in length and weighed around 600 pounds, so a pretty small dinosaur. I've got another Dilophosaurus figure here, this version a lot smaller, but it has some pretty cool coloring on it, and it has an attack feature that when you move its tail, it springs up its frills. Next, I've got a Styracosaurus dinosaur. This is an Ornithischian dinosaur, and they could grow to around 16 feet in length and weigh between 2 and 3 tons. This is a pretty small figure, but it has some really cool detailing. Check out all these spikes along its frill, and it has a special feature that when you move its tail, it lifts its head up for a stabbing action. And I've got 2 more Velociraptor figures in here. Both of these figures are kind of the average size for Velociraptor figures created by Mattel. This first one's got the gray with yellow detailing on its body, and this other one here is much more brighter with the red and then the green on top. Plus, this figure is actually spring-loaded in its legs, so if you press it down and release it, it'll fly up into the air, which is a pretty cool feature. And our final Ornithischian dinosaur is a Pachycephalosaurus. These dinosaurs lived in North America during the late Cretaceous period. They grew to around 15 feet in length, and they weighed between 800 and 1,000 pounds. And I believe this is the Legacy Collection Pachycephalosaurus, so it has some pretty cool coloring. I really like that shade of blue. and it has a special feature with its tail. It lowers its head with a spring and then springs it up for a headbutting action. And last of all is the Brachiosaurus for the Saurischian dinosaurs. Now this is a juvenile Brachiosaurus, but this species was one of the tallest and largest dinosaurs, reaching a height of around 42 feet. And not only that, but they could weigh up to 99,000 pounds, which is so much more heavier than any other dinosaur we've seen in this collection. So here is the entire collection standing up on the table. Now, which of these Saurischian dinosaurs was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And what about the other side? Which of these Ornithischian dinosaurs was your favorite? Let me know by commenting below. Let's start it off with this massive Stomp and Escape T-Rex. This dinosaur comes with this cage that you put on its face, and then by pressing the button on the back, it breaks free. This next T-Rex is the Battle Damage edition from Jurassic World Dominion. This features a posable head and jaw, as well as the arms, legs, and tail. And best of all, it's got the battle damage that you can turn on and off. Next, we've got a giant Spinosaurus figure from Camp Cretaceous. This figure is in the classic brown color with the red on the face and on the spine. And it features posable arms, legs, and a tail. And there's a button at the top of its jaw for chomping and roaring. Up next in this collection, we've got a giant Giganotosaurus figure. This figure features posable arms and legs, and best of all, it has two action buttons. One to swing its torso around, and one button for jaw chomping action. This next dinosaur is not a real-life dinosaur, but I think it would fall into that category of dinosaurs. This is the Indominus Rex Battle Damage Edition. It has posable arms and legs, plus a chomping action for its jaw. I've still got a few more T-Rex figures in here. This one is an older figure, and it was also custom colored camo green. It features posable arms, legs. It's also got a button on its foot for some stomping sound effects. And best of all, you can use the tail to activate a chomping action or a roaring action. And here is another massive T-Rex figure, but this one's quite special. This is the Hammond edition Tyrannosaurus Rex. It features an extremely posable body. You can bend basically every limb like you would be able to in real life. And my favorite part is it's got some marbled eyes. The next Saurischian dinosaur that I've got is this Megaraptor from Jurassic World Dominion. It features posable arms and legs, and it has a chomping action when you press down on the body. Also from Jurassic World Dominion is this Atrociraptor figure. This basic figure features posable arms, legs, and a tail, but sadly it doesn't have any attack buttons. This next figure I got is one that I bought quite recently. This is the Hammond Collection Concavinator. Just like the T-Rex that we saw earlier, it features a very posable body. You can basically adjust any limb that it would be able to move in real life. Plus, this is just one crazy looking dinosaur species. Next, why don't we open up these brand new ones that I bought just for this video. This is the Jurassic World Heroes of Gujitsu, and this is the Giganotosaurus figure. Wow, it is extremely squishy and very rubbery. It looks pretty close to a Giganotosaurus. It's got the green coloring with the spike running along its back and on the top of its head. And its whole body is this super squishy rubber, but its head is a hard plastic that you can actually have a chomping action with. But let's check out the biggest feature, which is the squishiness. Let's see if there's anything on the inside of it when you squish it. So there's some type of liquid and some beads in there too. You can kind of see them right there. There's a bunch of little plastic beads and some type of green gooey liquid. It is extremely squishy and pretty relaxing actually. Now because it's so soft and squishy, it won't be able to stand on its own. It'll fall over. But this is a pretty cool, relaxing toy. Now let's check out the Heroes of Gujitsu Tyrannosaurus Rex from Jurassic World. All right, this one is quite a bit different. It's actually noticeably heavier. This one also has the soft rubber body, but the hard plastic head with that chomping action. And in this figure, instead of having some liquid and those plastic beads like the Giganotosaurus, this one is a really tough rubber that I think you can stretch super far. Check that out. and then it'll just snap right back into place slowly. But oh, check that out. Looks like there's actually something inside of the T-Rex. Looks like there's a ton of bones, and I don't know what that black thing is. Is that a bug or something? That's really weird. So it seems like this one is meant to be stretched instead of squished, and it can stretch really far. Look at that. Overall, pretty cool, and still quite relaxing to play with. Now let's keep digging through our Saurischian collection here. Next up is this giant Carnotaurus figure. This figure from Jurassic World features posable tiny little arms and back legs, and you can use the tail to move the head around, as well as chomp the jaw. Here we've got our first Allosaurus of this collection. This dinosaur figure features posable front arms, legs, and tail. It's got some cool little spikes running down its back all the way to its tail. And its biggest feature is this slide lever action for the sound effects and chomping. Here is another Allosaurus figure, but I think that this one is actually a bit older than the one that we just saw. This one features posable arms and legs, and instead of a slide lever action on its back, it has one single button for chomping. Over here is our first Pyroraptor of the collection. This figure is from Jurassic World Dominion and is the basic edition, so there is no chomping action, but the arms, the legs, and the tail are posable. Next up, we've got a big old Carcharodontosaurus figure. This dinosaur figure features some bright coloring along its face, running down its back. This dinosaur also has some pretty cool spikes coming down its back all the way to the tail. And it features posable arms, legs, and a tail, and it has one button on its back for a chomping action. This is another Velociraptor figure. It's just as big as the Pyroraptor and is also a basic edition, so there is no chomping action, but the arms, the legs, and the tail are posable. Here's what I think is a really cool looking dinosaur figure. This is a Suchomimus figure. It features some bright coloring and a spine that runs all the way from its head down to its tail, and it has posable arms, legs, and a tail, plus there is one action button on its back for a chomping action. Next up is the Yangchuanosaurus figure. This is a pretty recent one, I believe from Jurassic World Dominion, and it features posable arms, legs, and the tail actually controls the entire torso, so you can swing its head back and forth and chomp its jaw. This next dinosaur is one of the newest that I have. I think it might be from the new Dino Tracker series, and I believe it's called an Eocarcharia. It features some feather texturing all over its body. It has posable arms, legs, and a tail. And like many of the newest dinosaurs that Jurassic World is releasing, it has this lever that you swing back and forth for a chomping action. Up next is a battle damaged Baryonyx figure. You can see some of the battle damage on its neck and on its leg, and it has posable arms and legs and one single button on its back for chomping. Here is another Baryonyx figure. This one is a bit more recent. It also has posable arms and legs and the tail as well, and there is the slide lever action right at the top of its back for a bunch of sound effects and chomping motions. Next up, we've got a classic Ceratosaurus figure. I believe that this figure is from Camp Cretaceous, and it features posable arms, legs, and a tail, and a single button on its back for the chomping. This next figure is a miniature Spinosaurus figure. Unlike the Camp Cretaceous version that we saw earlier, this one has dark green coloring, but it still has the red on its face and on its spine, and since it's a basic figure, there is no chomping action, but the arms, the legs, and the tail are posable. Here we've got the crazy looking Scorpiovenator figure from Jurassic World Dominion. This features tiny posable front arms and back legs, and a chomping action when you press down on its back. Here is one more Baryonyx figure. This one has similar coloring to the last one that we saw, but instead of a slide lever action, it has one button on its back for chomping. Next up is not a dinosaur, but it is Kenji from Camp Cretaceous. They're riding around in this motorized sphere that I'm sure you recognize from the shows, and you can even open it up to put in different characters too. Here is a miniature Carnotaurus figure from Jurassic World Dominion. It features posable arms, legs, tail, neck, and face, and it's got the iconic broken horn at the top of its head. I've also got some smaller Velociraptor figures in here. This first one is a battle damage edition. You can open and close the battle damage right on its side. I also have this leaping Velociraptor figure. It is super brightly colored with the red and green stripes. And it's a leaping Velociraptor because its legs are spring-loaded, so you can actually launch it into the air. Next up is another battle damage dinosaur. This is the Atrociraptor, and it features a posable face, neck, arms, legs, and it has the battle damage right on the side that you can turn on and off. Here's another Velociraptor figure, but this one is a bit special. This is from the Amber collection. So this figure is more posable than many of the basic and normal figures, which is pretty cool. Over here, I've got a little Velociraptor beta figure. It features posable arms, legs, neck, and head. And of course, it has the iconic blue stripe running down both sides. And here, I think, is the last Velociraptor in this collection. It is Velociraptor Blue, but it is actually a snapping toy. So you can press on it and it'll open up. You can see its eyes and mouth, and you press on its legs to close it up, and it looks like it's asleep. Over here, I've got another Spinosaurus figure. This is a miniature version and quite a bit older than many of my figures. It features posable arms, legs, and you can use the tail to move the head in a really lifelike way. Next is the miniature Troodon figure. This dinosaur features a posable neck and mouth, as well as the arms, the legs, and the tail. Look at this. This is not another dinosaur. This is Dr. Ian Malcolm. Up next is a baby T-Rex figure. It's bright green and it features posable arms, legs, and you can use the tail for a chomping action. And finally, I've got a very small Indominus Rex figure. This one has a bright and reflective silver painting all over its back. And even though it is super small, you can still even open the mouth. Now here is the entire collection standing side by side. And I actually forgot to mention this big dinosaur right here is the Apatosaurus, which is also part of the Saurischian dinosaur classification, as well as this huge Brachiosaurus on the other side, also part of the Saurischian classification. Let's get started with these super colossal figures. This is the Jurassic World Dominion T-Rex with the dark brown coloring and the black detailing along its body. The other super colossal T-Rex I have selected for this collection is a custom colored one. Check out this light blue coloring and the dark red eyes. And this T-Rex figure is definitely a lot older than the Dominion T-Rex figure. And we're gonna stand them together on the T-Rex side. And now for the I-Rex side. This is the super colossal I-Rex figure. I believe was released as part of Camp Cretaceous. It's got a whole lot more bumps and texturing compared to the T-Rex figures, and I love its teeth. And that figure is gonna go over here on the I-Rex side. And next up, why don't we open up the brand new Dino Tracker's Indominus Rex. Now this new I-Rex figure is very interesting. It's actually quite a bit smaller than many of my other I-Rex figures. You can see the barcode scanner right there for the app, so you can check that out on your phone. Of course, it's still got the same coloring and detailing as many of the other I-Rex figures, but this one has a feature that I don't know I've ever seen before. It has the button on its tail to activate the chomping. But check that out, there's some glowing green lights inside. That's pretty cool. So now let's set this on the I-Rex side, right in front of the super colossal. Now let's go over here to our bin and grab another T-Rex. We're first gonna go with this one. I believe this is a Camp Cretaceous battle damage T-Rex. They actually released another one for Jurassic World Dominion that's pretty similar, other than it has different coloring. But these figures are pretty cool because they've got the huge battle damage on the side that you can turn on and off with the click of a button. That's pretty cool. And we're gonna place this right underneath the Dominion T-Rex. Now back to the I-Rexes, we're gonna grab this camouflage I-Rex one. This one looks pretty wild. Now this one is actually a custom colored I-Rex. So all this coloring you can see here was done in detail by someone that I bought from on eBay. Even the blood on its mouth too. That's pretty awesome. Now let's find a place for it on the I-Rex side. How about way there in the back? There we go. Now back to the T-Rexes, we're gonna go with this big figure. This is the Terran T-Rex. This Jurassic World T-Rex has the classic brown coloring over most of its body and a slightly lighter underbelly. You can see it's got some hidden battle damage along its face. It looks like those are kind of scars. That's pretty cool. But the special feature of this figure is the button on its back, which causes a huge tearing action. And not only that, but there's another button on its back to swing the tail back and forth too. So now let's set this on the T-Rex side, and we're gonna have it go way in the back over here. And this T-Rex is really face to face with that I-Rex figure. Next, let's grab this huge I-Rex figure right here. This is the Battle Damage Edition I-Rex. Check out the size difference between this one and the Dino Tracker I-Rex that I just bought. This one might be twice the size of that one. And it's still got all the cool texturing and spikes and detailing. Plus it has the battle damage on its side that you can turn on and off. Now let's set this one in the back here, right next to the super colossal I-Rex. For the T-Rexes, we're gonna go with the Jurassic World Dominion version. Now this T-Rex figure looks very similar to the Dominion super colossal figure right here. You can tell that this was the color theme that they were going for that film. And like many other T-Rex figures, it has the tail that can move the torso around, as well as open and close the jaw. And we're gonna put this one right next to the older super colossal T-Rex. Let's dive back in here. This other giant T-Rex figure is one of the classic I-Rexes. This Jurassic World figure is pretty similar to the battle damage one way back here, except that it doesn't have the battle damage on the side. Instead, it has a button right on its back used for slashing its claws. Plus, of course, you can use the button on the tail to activate the jaw. And we're gonna set this one right next to the battle damage I-Rex. This is the Stomp and Escape T-Rex from Jurassic World. And this figure is built a little bit differently than a lot of the other T-Rex figures. You can see that its legs actually have different joints, as well as this big joint right in its torso. And I'll show you what that does. So it has this really cool action where it lifts up its head to roar. And the other cool part is that you can actually twist the tail to get stomping action with sound effects. So that's why those weird looking joints are right there. And of course, this T-Rex figure is gonna go on the T-Rex side. This next one is a pretty special I-Rex figure. This is a hybrid edition I-Rex. Now this Jurassic World figure actually came out for the first Jurassic World movie and was made by Hasbro instead of Mattel, who makes many of the newer figures now. It's got some crazy coloring on its arms and its underbelly and feet, and that bright red along its back and its head too. Plus there's a hidden action button on its side that you can press to activate more spikes on its back. So now let's set this on the I-Rex side, right on the front lines. Now right here is that Jurassic World Dominion battle damage T-Rex that I was telling you about earlier. Now let's compare it to the earlier version that they released, and they're pretty similar in shape and size. I wouldn't be surprised if they're actually the exact same figure, but with different coloring. And this Dominion version is a much more like orange-brown coloring over all of its body, but it's still got the battle damage on its side. Now let's set up this T-Rex right next to the others. This next I-Rex figure is pretty unusual actually. It looks totally different than many of the other figures. This figure is still made by Mattel, but I believe it's from the Imaginext line. So it looks to be like a figure for a slightly younger audience. But it has one of the most unique attack actions that I've ever seen. When you move its tail up and down, it actually swings its torso in all sorts of directions. That's pretty cool. That is very unique too. So let's go ahead and set it down on the I-Rex side. This T-Rex figure is another extreme damage T-Rex, but it is not like the others. And that's because it does not have the battle damage opening on the side that you can press a button, but rather it has this painting all over its body for the battle damage. And other than that, it has a very orange coloring with the darker brown on top. And let's set it in the back here next to the Dominion T-Rex. This I-Rex figure is another one made by Hasbro for the first Jurassic World movie. And it sure is quite a bit different. First off, it's got this real feel skin along its neck and on the top of its head. And instead of having a chomping button on its tail, you can actually move its arm to open and close its mouth. And you can kind of tell on its back that it has lights underneath whenever you move its arm, but it's pretty faint, so you can't really tell when it's light out. But nonetheless, let's set it down on the I-Rex side here. For the T-Rex side, we're gonna go with another figure that was released for the first Jurassic World movie, made by Hasbro. This smaller T-Rex figure is a light tan color, much lighter than the Dominion damaged T-Rex back there. And it looks pretty different in design too. It has a much longer head, a smaller body, and it has a single action button on its back for the chomping action. Now this figure is pretty old, so it doesn't work as well, but we're gonna put it right next to the extreme battle damage T-Rex on this side. Up next, we've got the Feeding Frenzy Indominus Rex figure. This figure is a whole lot smaller than a lot of the Indominus Rex figures we've seen so far, but it still has a pretty large face for how small its body is. And it's got some unique special features. First, there's this button on its nose that you can get some sound effects from. Then you can move its tail to open up its mouth. Then you can feed this Indominus Rex by pressing down on its mouth, and it'll chomp its mouth closed. Now let's set this I-Rex right on the front lines against the T-Rexes. This next figure is a classic T-Rex, I think was released for the second Jurassic World movie, which is Fallen Kingdom. It's got the classic brown body with a darker top and a button at the top of its head for the chomping and roaring action. And we're gonna put this guy right on the edge because we're running out of space for all these T-Rexes. This is the Sound Surge Indominus Rex figure released for Jurassic World Dominion. It's pretty basic in design. It has the same coloring as all the rest, but its one big feature is that it has this speaker on its side and this button on the top for the sound effects. Let's place this dino right behind the Feeding Frenzy I-Rex. And I've actually got the Sound Surge edition for the T-Rex as well. It's actually a little bit smaller than the I-Rex figure, but it still has the button on its top for the sound effect. And we're gonna place this one on the front lines of the T-Rex side. This next figure is an even smaller I-Rex figure. This is from the first Jurassic World movie as well. It has some battle damage on its side that you can open and close, and you can use the tail on this figure to move the head and chomp its mouth. Now let's place this kind of in the back for the I-Rex side. We're getting down to just a few T-Rexes left. This is a Lego T-Rex figure for Jurassic World. It has kind of similar coloring compared to the Jurassic World regular figures with the brown, and it's got some darker brown detailing along its body. So why don't we place this right up front here next to the Sound Surge T-Rex. I've also got the Lego I-Rex figure. This one, interestingly, is actually a similar color to the Lego T-Rex over here instead of the classic gray coloring for the I-Rex. I think that makes it pretty cool. Plus, it has some really cool teeth. They're pretty unique, I think. Check that out compared to the T-Rex over here. And here's the I-Rex's teeth. And our next T-Rex figure is a super small green T-Rex figure from the first Jurassic World movie. It's got a pretty large face for its size. It has some battle damage right on the side of its body, and you can use the tail to chomp the head and move the head back and forth too. Let's set this up right next to the Lego T-Rex. And here is our final I-Rex. This, I believe, is the Bite and Thrash Indominus Rex. Now, similar to this T-Rex that we just saw a moment ago, this one has the battle damage right on the side, and you can use the tail to move the head up and down and chomp the jaw. And we're actually gonna leave this figure right here, right in front of the Lego I-Rex. And here is our final figure of this collection. It is a juvenile T-Rex figure. It has a light green body with a darker brown accenting on its back, and you can use the tail to chomp the mouth open and closed, which is pretty cool considering how small this figure is. Now the full collection is set up. Who do you think would win in this battle? The T-Rexes or the I-Rexes? first and biggest dinosaur in this entire collection is this Hammond collection, Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's got an amazingly detailed body with the coloring as well as the texturing all over. It's got some amazing marbled eyes and a pretty realistic mouth too. We're gonna set that right here as the biggest dinosaur. Next up, also from the Hammond collection, is the Ornithischian dinosaur. Also stands on 2 legs and has some pretty cool yellow coloring with the gray striping and a red crown on the top of its head. And here it goes, next in size. Next up in the collection is the Hammond collection Mamenchisaurus figure. It has tan coloring with the brown striping and some dark orange along its eyes and at the front of its face too. Now let's go ahead and set that up next in size. Here is the Hammond collection Parasaurolophus figure. It is also mostly tan colored, but it's got some purple striping and orange right along the top, and of course the huge horn on the top of its head. So now let's put this one also in line and grab our next one, which I think is the Ceratosaurus from the Hammond collection. This dinosaur is colored pretty classically for this species. It's got the tan body with the brown striping and then the red along the back, all the way up to the face. Now let's put that in line as the next largest one, and let's grab our first Amber collection figure, which is a Velociraptor figure. I believe this is the generic Velociraptor from the Amber collection, so it doesn't have a name, but it has some pretty cool coloring with the bright orange and the brown striping. So now let's go ahead and put this one in line, and let's grab our next Amber collection Velociraptor, and this one does have a name. This one is Velociraptor Charlie. This figure also has some pretty bright coloring. This one is bright green instead, and a little more faded green striping along the top. And it looks like it actually has a headpiece. I think that might be a camera, just like in the movies. So now let's get this one next in line, next to the orange Velociraptor. And here is the next Velociraptor from the Amber collection. This is Velociraptor Delta. And the coloring on this figure is a bit different than the 2 that we've already seen. These 2 ones are more like stripes on its back, but this one has more of like speckles on its back. It does have some striping as well. So this is a really cool blue-green color. So now let's put this Velociraptor in line and grab the next Amber collection Velociraptor, which is this one. And this is Velociraptor Echo. This Velociraptor has probably the most classic coloring out of any of these other Velociraptors, with the brown on the sides and then the black along the top. So now let's put this Velociraptor in line and let's check out the next and one of the coolest Velociraptors. This, of course, is Velociraptor Blue. It has the iconic stripe running down from its tail all the way up to the top of its head, and it has some glowing gold eyes. Now let's set this up in line and grab our next figure, which is actually not a dinosaur, but a human. This is the Amber collection Owen Grady figure. Looks like he's wearing the dark brown vest, blue shirt, and has a pair of jeans on. So now let's put this very fittingly right next to Velociraptor Blue. Next, why don't we open up a brand new one? This is the Amber collection John Raymond Arnold figure. And check that out, it looks like it even comes with the torn off arm as well. Let's open it up. First off, here is the John Arnold figure in his lab coat. You can see a Jurassic Park logo right on his shirt, and it looks like it actually comes with a computer set for this figure. So let's check that out. Check that out. This is all one piece, and this is the computer that he was working on in the movie. Looks like there's also a headpiece that you can have for him to put on his head, just like that. And there's an extra pair of hands, and the weirdest part, the coolest part, is this torn off arm right here. Let's check that out. Now it looks like you can't obviously put it back on the figure because it already has 2 arms, so it's a separate piece. But that's pretty cool. It's a funny little addition to this set. Now let's go ahead and set him up next in line, and let's grab our next Amber collection figure, which is this Dennis Nedry figurine from the first Jurassic World movie. He's wearing a blue lab coat. It's got a blue sweater underneath and the brown pants. So now let's go ahead and set him next in line here. And next up is the famous John Hammond from the Amber collection. And you can see that he's got his classic cane with the mosquito right on the top of it too. Now let's go ahead and set them up in line, and I had to sit these down because sadly they won't stand up on their own on this grass here. But let's grab our next dinosaur, which is this scary looking dinosaur. This is the Hammond collection Irritator dinosaur. It's got some really cool yellow striping, and the rest of its body is a brown color, and it's got this dark black color along its face and a bright red crown on the top of its head. And we're gonna go ahead and put that next in line, right next to John Hammond. Next, we're gonna go with the Hammond collection Spinosaurus. But wait, this isn't actually a Spinosaurus figure. This actually used to be a Hammond collection Baryonyx. You can see that the spine is actually custom made and put onto the figure, and the rest of the figure was repainted to look like a Spinosaurus. So we're gonna put this one next in line here. And here we go. Here is the Hammond collection Baryonyx, the normal figure. Over here is the Spinosaurus that was remade from it, and this is the original version. It's got the dark blue coloring with the gray and the white striping, and a little bit of reflective blue coloring right underneath its eye. So now let's go ahead and set this up next in line here. For the next figure, we've got the Hammond collection Concavinator figure. This has some really amazing coloring with the dark blue along most of its body, and the orange on its tail, and a little bit of red on its face. And now, since we're running out of room on this end of the table, we'll start a new line in the front right here for the next biggest dinosaur. Coming right up is the Hammond collection Triceratops figure. This is pretty classic coloring. You can see that it's mostly brown. It has different shades of brown on different parts of its body. And a really cool part that I like is that it shows a lot of wear and tear on its horns, which I think gives a lot of detail to it. So we're gonna put that next in line, right next to the Concavinator. And here is the Hammond collection Ankylosaurus figure. This figure is much larger compared to my regular Ankylosaurus figures, and it has some different coloring too. It's like a dark green along the top. It has the tan gray spikes and then the lighter underbelly as well. And check it out, you can even open and close its mouth. All right, now let's put that right next to the Triceratops figure. Now here is a really cool figure from the Amber collection. This is a Pteranodon, and now it's actually got rubberized wings, so it's actually pretty flexible along its wings, whereas its body is still the hard plastic. So why don't we go ahead and put this right next to the Ankylosaurus figure. And now we're gonna open up our next new figure set. This is the Amber collection Dimorphodons. So let's check it out. Now here is the first Dimorphodon. It looks like it is in a standing pose. You can see that its wings are flapped shut, so it's actually walking along the ground. And you can still open and close the mouth and move the neck around and all of its body parts still. And here is the other Dimorphodon. This one is in a open-winged flying pose. It's got some pretty cool shading along its back and along its wings, and you can pose basically every part of its body too. Now let's set these two down next in line. First the standing Dimorphodon, and then the open-winged flying Dimorphodon. Next up is the Hammond collection miniature Velociraptor figure. This one has some gray coloring with white striping and then some blue and red along the top of its head. So now let's go ahead and set that up next in line. And next I've got a Dimorphodon figure here. This one's actually pretty recent as well. Now this Dimorphodon figure actually has a removable frill, which unfortunately is a little difficult to take on and off, but it's still a pretty cool feature, and we're gonna put it right next to the Raptor. And to finish it off, I've got some of the miniature figures from the Hammond collection. First off is the Ellie Sattler figure right here in the red sweater. There's also another Dennis Nedry figure from the Hammond collection this time. There's the Alan Grant figure in his adventure outfit. And finally, another John Hammond figurine in the same costume. first figure that we're checking out is a Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. This T-Rex figure, I believe, was released during the Fallen Kingdom era of Jurassic World. It is the only T-Rex I have that has this bright orange body with the darker brown on the top. And as you'll see with many of these super colossal figures, it has a stomach compartment so you can actually feed this T-Rex smaller figures. And an interesting fact about T-Rexes is that they had brains twice as big as those of other giant carnivores, which means that T-Rexes were actually highly intelligent. Now it's time for our next super colossal figure, and this is another T-Rex. But this T-Rex looks quite a bit different. This one was released for Jurassic World Dominion, so it's a bit more recent of a figure. It's got the totally different coloring with the dark brown and black detailing, but other than that, it's pretty much the same figure in shape and size. So let's give this T-Rex a snack in its stomach compartment. And an interesting fact about the T-Rex was that the strength of their jaw could crush a car. That is super strong. On to our next super colossal figure. This is yet another T-Rex, but this one's pretty special because I had this one custom colored. Now I believe that this was an orange T-Rex originally from the Fallen Kingdom collection, but now I've had it painted to have this fiery red coloring with the yellow and then the black along the top, and I gotta say, it looks really epic. And one interesting thing about this figure is that its eyes don't have pupils, which I think make it look a whole lot more evil. So then let's feed this T-Rex another little snack. And another interesting fact about the T-Rexes was that they might have been able to run between 10 to 25 miles per hour. And you would have a pretty hard time running away from them if they ran that fast. For our next super colossal figure, we've got the Endoraptor figure. Now this figure was released pretty recently, either earlier this year or late last year, and it features the iconic black coloring with the gold striping along the side. It also has much larger front arms compared to the T-Rex, and huge claws on their feet, very similar to raptors. So let's feed this Endoraptor a little snack, and did you know that Endoraptors actually are able to use echolocation to locate their prey? That's a pretty scary fact, especially when you see these teeth. Next up is the first herbivore of this super colossal collection. This is a mamenchisaurus dinosaur figure. This is a sauropod dinosaur, and I bought this one just about a week ago. It's got the brown coloring with the darker brown striping on the top. And it's actually kind of hard to show it all in camera because its neck is so long. But an interesting fact about these dinosaurs was that their lungs operated like a bird's rather than humans. Now here is a much brighter dinosaur. This is my super colossal Triceratops figure. This big figure was released for Jurassic World Dominion, and it looks a lot like the Triceratops that you see in the movie. And while its head shape is a bit different than a Velociraptor's head, it has pretty similar front arms, and I think the feet and the legs look pretty similar to a Velociraptor as well. Now in real life, Velociraptors weighed only between 20 and 70 pounds, which is a whole lot smaller than a T-Rex or anything like that. So let's feed this dinosaur a little snack and move on to the next dinosaur. Next up is one of my favorite dinosaur species. This is the Carnotaurus Toro super colossal figure released for the Camp Cretaceous series. It's got the mostly orange body with the brown on the top and then the lighter underbelly. It's got a shorter snout compared to T-Rexes, and Carnotauruses also have these two horns on their head. An interesting fact is, although we don't know exactly what these horns were used for, it's speculated that they were either used for attacking and defense, or perhaps even for attracting a mate. Now then, let's feed this Carnotaurus a little snack, and let's move on to the next dinosaur. Now here is another T-Rex collection. I have quite a few super colossal T-Rexes, and this one is actually another special custom colored one. So it's been painted over to now have this camouflage green coloring with some black along the top. And you can see that they even added in some battle damage on the sides, on the legs. And now this figure's pretty old, so you can see that some of the paint is starting to wear off. It looks like it was the orange T-Rex previously. But this might be some of my favorite coloring out of all the super colossal figures that I have. So let's give them a little snack, and let's move on to the next dinosaur. And now here is the first Velociraptor figure. This, of course, is Velociraptor Blue. And it's got this faded green coloring over most of its body, and of course the bright blue stripe along its side. The front arms have the massive claws, as do the feet, much like the Endoraptor. And an interesting fact that you may already know is that now they think that Velociraptors had feathers over its entire body. So this is actually not very accurate anymore. But let's go ahead and feed a snack to the Velociraptor Blue and move on to our next dinosaur. Next up, we've got another giant sauropod dinosaur. This is a Brachiosaurus. And this specific figure was released for Jurassic World Dominion. There's actually an older version of the Brachiosaurus dinosaur that I'll show you in a little bit. But the most notable difference is the coloring along its body and this bright blue reflective paint along its head. And an interesting fact about the Brachiosaurus is that they could weigh up to 25 tons. Which is massive. And now it's time for the super colossal Indominus Rex dinosaur. This figure has the same iconic gray coloring as many of the smaller versions of it, but it's got quite a bit more detailing with all these bumps and spikes, especially the ones on its back, and even the ones on its arms too. Now this figure was released for Camp Cretaceous, and as you probably already know, is a man-made dinosaur, which they created by mixing the DNA of a Carnotaurus, Giganotosaurus, and a ton of other dinosaurs to make the ultimate predator. Now let's feed this Indominus Rex and move on to the next dinosaur. Next up is another four-legged dinosaur. This is the Apatosaurus. This figure has the dark green coloring with the lighter green striping along the top. And on this figure, you can move the legs, the tail, the neck. You can move the head up and down, as well as open and close the mouth. And although this Apatosaurus figure looks smaller than the Brachiosaurus figure we saw earlier, in real life, these dinosaurs were actually larger than Brachiosauruses, sometimes by quite a lot. Now here we have a massive dinosaur made popular by the Jurassic World Dominion movie. This of course is the Giganotosaurus dinosaur. It's got the dark green coloring over pretty much its whole body other than the black detailing along its back. It's got a big old scary looking spine that runs all the way up to its head, and it's got some pretty scary looking teeth too, although it's worth noting that the front arms do look quite a bit larger compared to a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And an interesting fact about these dinosaurs, which you may already know if you saw the Jurassic World Dominion movie, is that they actually outweigh Tyrannosaurus Rexes by a little bit. But do you think a Giganotosaurus would defeat a T-Rex in a one-on-one battle? I'm not sure I know the answer to that, but let's go ahead and give this Giganotosaurus a little snack and move on to the next dinosaur. For our next super colossal figure, we've got another Velociraptor, but actually this one was custom repainted to look like an Endoraptor. And I think it works out pretty well because they're so similar in their shape, and it's just been repainted with this black along most of the body and then the gold stripe along both the sides. Although one important thing to note is that at least compared to the real super colossal Endoraptor, the size of the head on this figure is quite a bit smaller and the shape of the teeth is quite different as well. For the next dinosaur, we're gonna actually do a little side-by-side comparison. These are both Mosasaurus figures, but you'll notice that they look quite a bit different. This is the newer version called the Ocean Protector, and this one is an older version. Now in terms of body shape and size, they look pretty much identical, and on both of them you can open and close the jaws, you can move the flippers, and only on this darker figure here can you move the tail back and forth. But obviously the biggest difference between the two is the coloring. The newer version has a much darker coloring with some white specks all over its body, and the older version here is much lighter in color with a light blue on the sides and then a gray coloring along the top, and its mouth is a much more pinkish color compared to the new version. So which version do you like better, the new version or the old version? And next up is my final super colossal Tyrannosaurus Rex in my entire collection. And you probably haven't seen that many T-Rexes like this one because yet again, it is a custom painted T-Rex. It's got the blue-gray coloring over its entire body with the dark red eyes, which I really love. And instead of its teeth being white, they're a dirty gray color, which I think is a really nice touch. But since it's an older figure, you can see that the custom painting is starting to flake off a little bit, so it is pretty old. Now let's feed this T-Rex a little snack and move on to the next dinosaur. Now here is my largest quadrupedal dinosaur yet. This is my Dreadnoughtus dinosaur, which was released for Jurassic World Dominion. And it is a super long figure. It's kind of hard to even show how long it is from the tail all the way to the head. Plus it's got this pretty cool coloring as well. It's kind of like a dark blue coloring along its body. It's got the lighter underbelly and then the tan detailing on its back all the way up to its head. Now I said earlier that the Apatosaurus was heavier than the Brachiosaurus, But the Dreadnoughtus is even heavier than the Apatosaurus. These dinosaurs weighed around 65 tons. So this is the heaviest of the three by far. And now here is the final super colossal dinosaur of this collection. This is another Brachiosaurus dinosaur. But it actually looks a little bit different compared to the one that I showed you earlier. This is the original version, so it doesn't have any of the new coloring, such as the reflective blue paint along the top of its head right here. So this is just an older and much more basic version of the Brachiosaurus, just with that light brown over pretty much all of its body. But still, this is quite a massive figure nonetheless. Let's first start by unboxing the Steve figurine. And here it is. Steve is wearing the blue pants with a teal colored shirt. And overall, it's a pretty cool figure. You can move the arms up and down. You can move the legs back and forth. You can move the head side to side and even up and down a little bit. And this Steve figure actually has hands, so you can remove this. And then there's a spot to put in some tools. Plus, Steve came with these other accessories that we will check out in a little bit. But first, let's meet our first T-Rex to face off against Steve. This is the super colossal Tyrannosaurus Rex in the custom painting. This is one of my most unique T-Rexes in the collection because it has this fiery styled paint job all over it. Plus, this super colossal figure actually has a stomach compartment all the way down here, so you can actually feed it smaller dinosaurs and it'll be stored in its stomach here. Now then, let's go ahead and face this off against Minecraft Steve. All right, look at that size difference. Steve is way over here. It's a tiny little figurine. I bet he could even fit inside of the T-Rex's mouth. And it's interesting, they both got different color combos going on. Steve is in a more blue and cool colors, whereas the T-Rex is in fiery red tone. The next T-Rex to face off is another custom colored Tyrannosaurus Rex, but this one is in a camouflage green coloring. I think this coloring is way better than the original painting, especially around the face here. Check out those teeth and all the shading around its eyes and the rest of its face. So now let's face this T-Rex off against Minecraft Steve. And as you can see, there's still a huge size difference between the two, although this one is a bit more closer in size than the super colossal one. And this T-Rex actually has a really cool chomping ability that chomps downwards. I don't think you or I or Steve would want to be in the way of those chompers. Our next T-Rex is another green T-Rex, but this is actually the original painting. This is the Legacy Collection Tyrannosaurus Rex. It has a darker green body with some gray and tan detailing along the top of its back, and it has a button at the top of its head for the chomping action. And now let's face that off against Steve. And the T-Rex is still quite a bit larger. You can see that it stands way over Steve's head still, although they're getting closer in size now. What do you think? Would Steve stand a chance in a fight against a T-Rex like this? I think we gotta give Steve some tools, which we'll give him in the next round. I think this next T-Rex is a little bit larger. This is the new 93 Real Feel Jurassic Park Tyrannosaurus Rex. And it's called the Real Feel T-Rex because its skin is actually a soft rubber, unlike most of the figures nowadays, like these ones over here that are hard plastic. Plus, this T-Rex has a stomach compartment as well, so just like the super colossal T-Rex, you can feed this smaller one small dinosaurs. And finally, it's got some sound effects as well. Now it's time to face off against Steve. And yeah, this T-Rex is a whole lot larger than that green one over there was. And just like the super colossal T-Rex, we've got two different styles of coloring. We've got the cool blue coloring over here with Steve and the fiery red coloring over here. Although this one looks a lot more realistic than the custom colored painting over here. Let me know in the comments below, who do you think would win in this fight? But before you comment, I'm going to give Steve a tool here now. And that tool is his mighty sword. And this thing is actually made of metal. So this is actually quite heavy. Whereas the actual Steve figurine over here, I think is entirely made out of plastic. So now let's go ahead and give him the sword. And now Steve is ready to face off with the T-Rex. Comment below, who do you think would win in a battle? The next T-Rex is a very unique one. This is actually a deconstructed Tyrannosaurus Rex. Now this T-Rex is made so that you can actually see the insides of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. You can see some intestines there, there's a bunch of bones, and you can actually lift off the ribs right here to reveal what I think is the stomach underneath. That's pretty crazy looking. So now it is time to face off against Steve. And since this T-Rex can't even stand up, Steve is actually the taller one in this competition. And in fact, it actually looks like Steve already defeated this T-Rex because the T-Rex is already taken apart and totally destroyed. All right, way to go, Steve. Next up is another orange-brown T-Rex here, pretty similar to the deconstructed T-Rex that we saw right here. But obviously this one still has all of its limbs, although you can see quite a bit of battle damage on its tail, on its leg, on its side, and even on its face. So this T-Rex figure is in much better shape than the last. So now it's time for the face-off. Now once again, Steve is way shorter than the T-Rex here. And he's got a sword, but that might not do it. Let's go ahead and add his final accessory, which is this armor plating here. And these are actual real metal. So let's go ahead and add them on. All right, now Steve is armored up and ready for anything. And I gotta say, with all this actual real metal armor plating, Steve is a lot heavier than he was originally. It's pretty cool that they actually used metal for the armoring. And now, who do you think would win in this competition? Steve or the Tyrannosaurus Rex? The next T-Rex is the smallest T-Rex that we've seen yet in this collection. This is a juvenile T-Rex, and it is actually from Jurassic Park. You can see the tattoo on its leg right there. So this figure is quite old. And like many of the old Jurassic Park figures, it has the real feel skin, so it's a soft rubbery skin instead of hard plastic. And it's got a big old battle damage right on its side right there, which is pretty cool. Now it's time to face off the juvenile T-Rex versus Minecraft Steve. But wait, I've actually got a little surprise for you. And that is, I actually bought another set from Minecraft. This is the wolf set from the Diamond Level series. And here is the wolf figurine. It's a bit smaller than Minecraft Steve, but it's still quite posable. You can see that you can move its torso up and down, you can move its tail, and each of its legs individually, as well as its head. Plus, it came with these 4 accessories. First is this extra head that has different eye shapes compared to the original one right here. It also comes with this collar that you can put on the wolf, as well as this piece of meat right here, and a bone. So let's go ahead and set the wolf right next to Steve, and here we are with our face-off. Who do you think would win? Steve and the wolf, or the juvenile T-Rex? This T-Rex here is a similar size as the last, although it's very different in its coloring. And it should be noted that this is actually a model Tyrannosaurus Rex. So it is a hard plastic all over, and it does not move at all. It is stuck in this roaring pose. But it's still pretty cool. It's got some pretty decent coloring. It's got the yellow eyes and then tons of shading along its body as well. So let's face it off against Minecraft Steve. Oh, look at that. They're almost the same in height. The T-Rex is a little bit taller still. And this T-Rex sure looks fierce, but Steve is fully armored up with his sword and with his wolf companion. So comment below, who do you think would win, the T-Rex or Steve and the wolf? Here is one of our final T-Rexes. This one has some cool orange-brown coloring with the black stripes all along its back and on its legs. And like the last figure, this is a model figure, so there are no joints or arms or jaws that move on this figure, but it does have some pretty sizable teeth. And now let's face off against Minecraft Steve. And look at that, Steve is finally taller than one of the T-Rexes here. And not only that, but I think Steve is actually heavier than the T-Rex figure here as well. So now that the sizes are a lot more even, who do you think would win? Comment below. And now here is our final T-Rex, and by far the smallest one. This one is from Jurassic World, and it looks like it's mostly brown in color, but it does have this reflective gold coloring all over its body. Plus, despite how small it is, you can still open and close the mouth. That is pretty cool. Now let's face it off against Minecraft Steve, and look at that size difference. Steve is probably 3 times the size of this Tyrannosaurus Rex, and even the wolf is larger than the T-Rex. It's at least maybe like twice the size of this teeny tiny T-Rex. Now this does not look like a fair fight at all. Want to see more dino videos? Click the subscribe button now.